just check the sound before I get started. Is that okay? You can all hear me. Okay.
Is that too dark?
That's fine for me, if that's fine.
No, take the main
Maybe the
off.
side ones, that's nice. Yeah. Yes, thank you for the introduction. And yeah, I'm very sorry that I'm not Karen Lloyd. I had an email this morning, first thing, and she's like, can you stand in? So I also apologise, because my talk was at the end of this series, and it was meant to be, it's probably the least academic of everyone. It's more grounded in like community stuff that's happening in, well, I'm going to talk about North Lancashire, but North Lancashire, our side, is a very, I guess, soft border. So yeah, it's slightly different than probably some of the other talks you're going to get. And I also had to throw it together in like 2 hours this morning, so I'm really sorry. I'm going to try and keep it on time. If I feel like I'm going on too long, I'm going to try and wrap up. I'll just give a quick introduction to the Future Places Centre, because as you mentioned, I've helped pull this together. Daphne contacted us and asked for some researchers from the University at Lancaster to talk about the ecology, the soils, and the landscapes of this area, of Morecambe Bay, of Arnside, Silverdale. And I work at the Future Places Centre at Lancaster University. Oh, that's not changed on the screen. Why is that? Sorry. Let me just... Sorry. Try this again. Yeah, I work at the Future Places Centre at Lancaster University, and we have a lot of researchers that work across loads of different subjects, and a lot of them are working on Morecambe Bay, so it seems like a really nice centre to bring researchers out into the community to talk to people about what we're doing. And the Future Places Centre is a 5-year project that focuses on improving the health and well-being of communities around the Morecambe Bay area. And we've got disciplines from computing to environmental studies, from management and from contemporary arts. And you'll see that when I show you the list of speakers, like just how different everyone is. And the idea is that we're using existing research, we're using research into digital technology, the Internet of Things, and also environmental research as well, to try and help shape our place and the future of what this place might be like. And if digital has a part to play in that, what is the part that it has to play? Yes, and just to give you an idea of the theme, so we're doing stuff in the natural environment, so we've got people out in Morecambe Bay, in the sands, doing measurements, and looking at the ecologies of Morecambe Bay, but then using digital approaches to bring them to life. I'm working with the Eden project as well, that's going to be coming to Morecambe. We've got people that work in the built environment, so looking at how we can use sensors in the built environment to tell us more about the health of those environments for people and for animals and businesses working within them. And then we have the healthy living theme, which is all about kind of how does the environment, how do our built spaces affect our health, and how can digital and data tell us more about the health of people in a place. And Morecambe Bay is like the area that we're testing things out, and the idea is that we do stuff in Morecambe Bay area and they can scale out maybe if they're applicable to kind of across the UK and other places. Just to give you a flavour of the talk, so yes, it was meant to be Karen Lloyd today. She's an author. You might have read a book called The Gathering Tide, which is all around Morecambe Bay, but she's also a fellow of the Future Places Centre, where she's setting up an environmental arts kind of centre there, and bringing kind of artists, writers, and other creative kind of people in to talk about the environment and how our interaction with the environment shapes it and how the environment shapes us. And then we have Dan Harvey. He's from the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, which is based in Lancaster as well. He's going to talk about microplastics in the bay. John Quinton, he's an academic from Lancaster University. I think he's also an Arnside local. So he's going to talk about soils and net zero. Then we've got Susie, Liz and Serena. One's a hydrologist, one's a computer scientist, and the other is an artist. They do projects together. And they're going to talk about the Morecambe Bay Timescapes project. Then we've got Ada Pringle, who was the first woman who was ever employed at Lancaster University, and she's been doing work for, it must be 50 years, on, too much, the changing channels and the coast of the Kent Estuary. I think she's done fieldwork around Silverdale. Many of you are nodding, so you might be aware of her measuring the shifting sands, so she'll be talking about that. And then we're also going to be talking about food futures. So me and Karen hopefully will swap, so Karen will be at the end and hopefully give a talk then. So yes, I'm going to talk about food, and I'm going to talk about kind of why I'm no longer an academic, and why I now do a lot of work with the community, and how important it is to understand kind of where our food is coming from, to take back a bit more control over that. So yeah, and why I really struggle to explain what I do. I'm originally a soil scientist, so I spent a lot of years measuring stuff in soils, working with farmers around how they could manage their soils differently to improve the health of them, to improve their ability to respond to flooding, soil erosion, kind of the impact of climate change. And I got really stuck with just how little choice a lot of farmers have about what they actually do in terms of managing their soils, how much pressure comes from industry, from the economics of the food system, and how people have to produce food cheaply, and that often involves a lot of environmental degradation. And you can talk a lot about the best ways to do things, but people are quite often quite stuck. So I got a lot more interested in trying to figure out kind of how we can bring around change in the food system. And I've done stuff at a more kind of national level, but now I'm very focused on local stuff, because I think local kind of control of the food system and doing our own things in our place makes a really massive impact, and it feels a lot more rewarding than trying to talk to policymakers about what might need to be written in policy documents that don't always come to life ever, or it takes decades to come to life. So, yes, so I'll tell you a bit about what I've been doing, and the kind of what a lot of my work is with Food Futures, which is a food partnership based all across North Lancashire, bringing around basically lots of different things around food, lots of different changes around community food in our place. So I'm going to start a bit negative for a few slides. So the food system. The food system is massive, and there's loads of different parts to it, and there's loads of different types of food systems. But it's basically the way that food gets from where it's produced, how it's moved around, and how it gets to people, and then actually how it's wasted at the end. And the current food system that kind of dominates is very broken. And this is kind of well known now. Professor Tim Benton, who works for Chatham House, which is like a policy institute down in London, he's written, "The global food system is broken. The cost of the damage to human health and the environment is much greater than the profits that are made by the food and farming industry." And just to show here, this is widespread rainforest degradation. I think that's in Borneo, linked to palm oil, maybe linked to soya production as well. So it's huge environmental impacts, but it's also huge health impacts. So globally, 1 in 9 people are hungry or undernourished, but on the other hand, 1 in 3 people are overweight and obese. So we have like an obesity problem at one end, and we also have this kind of malnutrition problem at the other end. So, environmental degradation from intensification. So one of the only ways it's really profitable to make money from being a food producer of any scale, whether you're working in Borneo producing oil palm or soya, or in the UK producing dairy or eggs or chickens, is to intensify. And you might notice, I live on a canal, so I kind of move up and down the whole of Lancaster district. Sometimes I'm up here in Borwick, and sometimes I'm down in Cockerham towards Garstang Way. And around that way you'll see a lot of these chicken sheds, like intensive chicken sheds. Chickens inside all the time. Like air pollution coming out of those filters there, being fed most often soya from the rainforest or degraded rainforests. Fields around are totally covered in one type of monoculture grass or maize. So here, this bottom photo here is when you see maize, it's been kind of just harvested just before winter. The ground is bare, you have all this water rushing off and all this soil that's rushing off into the roads, rushing off into the rivers. So you get degradation kind of abroad, faraway places, but you also can get degradation happening right on our doorstep here in the UK, pollution into rivers. So intensification is causing a lot of problems, and there is this idea of sustainable intensification, and that is one way, that's one aspect that people are looking at, but there's also the idea of less intensification and more kind of human labour instead of always bringing like robotics and stuff into the food system. And I will say that this talk is definitely not on the sustainable intensification angle, it's on the kind of, let's bring food production back down to the human scale, humans and people involved in it. And we've also created a system that has waste and hunger built in. So overall, about 1/3 of all food produced globally goes to waste. The UK throws away around 9.5 million tonnes of food every year, even though 8.4 million people in the UK are in poverty. They're not in food. Yeah, I mean, this is not an unfamiliar sight, and I'll show some pictures later of one of the things we're doing locally, this gleaning project, where we're going out to farms and rescuing food that would otherwise be ploughed back into fields. And it's been really interesting for people going on those projects and just seeing perfectly good cauliflowers in a field that will just be ploughed back into the soil. And this is what happens because supermarkets and big food suppliers can afford to waste that food. And it's built in, so there's always going to be stuff for people in the supermarkets. So I just wanted to bring these examples, and this is where I pulled some slides from a different presentation, but I gave this one in the pandemic, because the pandemic was really interesting. It highlighted loads of issues with our food system. I'm sorry, now I'm like, there's a lot of negative slides, but I promise it will get positive. So in the pandemic, it really highlighted the kind of issue we have with food access. So during the start of the pandemic, around half of people who used a food bank had never needed one before. And then, this is Lancaster District. So the orange is in March 2020 and the red is in July 2020. And these are numbers of households that were using either the food banks or food clubs, which are they use food that was otherwise going to go to waste and supply that to members. And there's this huge increase. And what's strange is that this increase has gone down, but it hasn't gone down back to the levels. So we've got cost of living crisis now. I think we've had crisis after crisis, so maybe this explains why the numbers are staying very high compared to what they were like 5-10 years ago. Poor diets also put people at much greater risk of coronavirus and other issues. So if you had those underlying conditions, you're much more likely to have issues with having COVID-19. We had these empty shelves, I think you'll all remember this, but this comes because it will have this just-in-time model where food is always just about ready to go onto the shelves. And any kind of fluctuation, whether it be a pandemic, but there's other things, floods, droughts, we're really, really vulnerable because we're totally reliant on supermarkets to provide us that food often. And this is a pandemic thing it highlighted, but actually this is a problem all the time. But the pandemic showed that food producers in other countries in particular, or even in the UK, but this one is based on Spain, we have a lot of migrant workers. They are most at risk from any kind of crisis. So here with the pandemic, they found that people are not working in good conditions. You don't often see that in supply chains. And they were forced to live in very cramped conditions with no sort of protection, but still having to continue to work because food is this essential service. And this is the case. I think the pandemic was good because it highlighted some of these issues that are always there anyway, that these people are working in very poor conditions. And then pandemics are partly the result of our food system. So the ways that modern farming forces humans, animals and microbes closer contact, so by the degradation of the rainforest, by slowly eating into animal habitats, we're putting ourselves more at risk of diseases that will jump between species. So, that's the end of the negative. But I think I just wanted to make the case of that things need to change, and that people have been saying this for a number of years. The pandemic really put stuff into perspective for people, and this is what we're trying to do in North Lancashire is being replicated. Well, not replicated. It's happening all around the country in its own different ways. People, communities coming together and saying we want to do something different here, and what can we do? So we have this dream of a different type of food system. So this diagram here sort of shows the different parts of a food system. So you've got farming, food production at the top there, different resources you need to go in. You've got the economics, so how is food getting to people? So is it through shops or farmers markets, or is it through people growing their own food? The political system controls a lot of that. The economic system controls a lot of that. You have social stuff, so how are people talking about food? How are people eating food? Are they eating it together? Are they eating it alone? Do they have time to eat it? Do they have time to cook? And then you have the environmental, so all the impacts that the environment has on the food system. So as we're experiencing climate change, it's becoming harder and harder to produce some types of foods. We're getting less predictable weather, farmers are not so sure about when to harvest. But vice versa, the food system impacts on the environment. And we would like to see a system working that actually makes the soils, the airs, the waters, the biodiversity around us, the people wanting to grow food better. It's like regenerate it, let's make it into a better thing than it is now. One that creates little or no waste, one that's diverse and small scale and resilient, so it's not just one type of farming but lots of different types of farming, and a mixture of kind of animal, plants, all kind of not just in one place. So here we do a lot of animal farming. On the other side of the country in the east, they do a lot of arable farming, and that's actually created lots of problems with huge amounts of waste here and very little organic matter and kind of cattle manure and stuff on the east coast. So getting things more integrated, more diverse. And then connecting people with food. So where does the food come from? What are the landscapes that produce our food? Who are the people that produce our food? So connecting the people eating food up with the people that are producing it, the places that are producing it. And that communities make this happen. Like, we're not going to wait for a supermarket to make this happen for us or for a big corporation or the government. We're going to try and do this ourselves here in our place. And this is this idea of food sovereignty. So it allows communities control over the way the food is produced, traded and consumed. And it should create a system that is better for people and better for the environment rather than kind of a focus on profits, which is where the food system's kind of been driven for the past 40 years. And so this is, in Lancaster we had a food strategy development session back in 2018, and a whole mixture of people were here. So it's someone here from the hospital, someone Rod there, who's a permaculture farmer in the Ray Valley, lots of other people in the background there, and we all just got together and put down lots of ideas for what we'd like to happen here. And this was all part of developing Food Futures as a partnership. So we're North Lancashire's Sustainable Food Places Partnership, and we're part of a national network, so we have lots of other places around the UK doing similar things, and they're all part of Sustainable Food Places, and they provide like a little bit of funding to get you started. And we're a cross-sector, place-based food partnership that has the kind of shared vision of a thriving local food system which is healthy, resilient and fair. And yeah, we're part of this national network. So basically I was working as a soil scientist trying to connect people up that were going to do research with farmers and other people interested in food stuff. I started working with this group and I felt very inspired that this actually might be where change could happen, and trying to link in kind of where could research help what it was that we were trying to do here. And if research can help, what can it do, and can other places learn as well from what it is that we're doing? So I ended up becoming very involved with this. And this is, just in case you're not sure, this is North Lancashire. So there's Morecambe and Lancaster there. The Silverdale is just in the boundary, so it's basically Lancaster District City Council, Arnside in Cumbria. They've noticed that you kind of drive over the border, but it goes right out into like just south of Kirkby Lonsdale, just north of Garstang, with a big bit of the Forest of Bowland in it as well. So yeah, farming country, cow and sheep country mainly, not many vegetables, and quite a lot of very hard to grow, hard to manage hilltops. So just a brief history of Food Futures. So it's a partnership, and it came out of Transition Cities Lancaster's food group, and this was a group of people that were just running community food projects in Lancaster and Morecambe. So they were all voluntary basically, and they were all just doing a lot of growing projects, like food growing projects. And they wanted to make sure that their work started to be a bit more joined up, and they could learn from each other, and they could apply for money and stuff and grants together. So they launched in 2014, and they met for 4 years, completely voluntary, met monthly in a pub. In 2018, they got a coordinator grant, so they got someone in that could actually spend some time getting things a bit more organised. Had that strategy event in 2018 and rebranded to Food Futures. And from then on, it kind of went into having quarterly partnership meetings, trying to develop a draft action plan, and then themed working groups to carry out different areas that were kind of deemed to be important within the food system. And then in 2020 to 2021, which is kind of when I got involved, we started to develop our Food Futures, which is a community food strategy for North Lancashire. And the idea of that is it's meant to guide the work of the partnership and try and link things up a bit more and be a bit more strategic. So this is us. We have 5 working groups, and then we've got a Heart group, which is a steering group. So we have a group that looks at community food skills. We have the Lancaster District Food Justice Partnership, so they do a lot of work around food poverty, so they work with the food banks and the food clubs. We have the Healthy Food and Environment Working Group, which is, I coordinate that group. We have a Food Economy and Procurement Group, and we have a Comms and Engagement Group. And we have people that come from local institutions, from businesses, policy, lots of community groups, lots of community projects that come to the different various meetings and feed in what they want to see happen. And we take forward kind of things that were shared as part of the food strategy process, the visions that people shared for what they wanted to happen. We try and make some of those come to life rather than just always hearing what I think you're often consulted on and asked what you might like to happen. But then sometimes nothing really ever happens, so we're quite committed to trying to really make some of these things happen. And we have this vision. It's very generic, a thriving local food system that's healthy, resilient and fair. And I think that's really broad and no one can really disagree with any of those things. Because we have people that are vegan for animal rights reasons in the same meeting as people that are livestock farmers. And they're always going to disagree about some things, but you probably couldn't disagree about those three things. So it's trying to have different views but sitting in the same space with them. And then this is what we developed during the pandemic. So we developed this food strategy, our Food Futures. And as part of this, we got lots of people together online because we were going to do it in person. The pandemic came along. We waited a few months to see what would happen, and then we realised that nothing was going to go back to normal for a while. And we did lots of Zoom strategy days where around those different working groups we got people together to say, what would you like to happen? Imagine this area in 10 years' time, what would you like to see it being like in terms of food, in terms of how you cook, where you grow food, where you buy your food. We also drew on the Lancaster District People's Jury climate change recommendations, so that's something they did in the pandemic as well. Down in Lancaster they had a People's Jury where you get local people together to say what they think should happen in terms of our response to climate change. And they had lots of recommendations around food and around waste, so we incorporated those into the strategy. The Food Justice Partnership, so they used to call the Food Poverty Alliance, but they changed their name to Food Justice Partnership. They had a strategy already, so we incorporated that. We had focus groups with local farmer networks and procurement officers. We had some community conversations, trying to get more people involved. We've got kids painting pictures of what they'd like to see things to be like in the future, which were great. Lots of different things came back with that. Survey, we had we wrote it, we got lots of feedback. But in the end, we created this document, and central to this were these kind of visions that people shared. So we had these 5 themes. So the regenerative food economy and procurement. So this is the idea of a thriving food economy that is built around ecological and social values rather than profit-driven values. We had the right to nutritious and sustainable food for all. So that was around kind of food justice, reducing food poverty in different types of ways. We had the healthy food and environment, so that this idea of agroecology, which is agriculture that is built on the foundations of ecology, so foundations of nature rather than the foundations of, industry. And you might recognise, I don't know if you know Bill and Kath Grayson, they do a lot of conservation grazing around this area and up into the lakes as well. They have these big, massive cows. And they do grazing at very low levels, but in ways that kind of just complement the ecology of the places that are being grazed, but still obviously have them for meat as well. We have community food skills, so that we integrate horticulture and ecology into the education settings as part of the Morecambe Bay curriculum, that people have a chance, if they want to go into food production, that we have training pathways to allow them to go into that people have a chance to learn cooking skills, growing skills. And then we have something here about working together, so actually working in partnership, not doing this as individual kind of siloed organisations, but agreeing that we want to do this together. So I thought I'd just share some examples. And the idea of this is that, so these are the visions, and from this we pulled out lots of okay, so this is 2030, this is what we want it to be like, so what needs to happen 5 years from now, what needs to have happened 2 years from now, and they became our priorities to work on. And some of them have been taken off by other people, and some stuff we've got projects in to actually do fundamental pieces of work. So I thought I'd share a few of those examples with you now. So So regenerative food economy. So this is our example here, a project that we're currently running, and hopefully it will be a long-term thing that will grow. It's called The Plots, and it's North Lancashire's Farm Start scheme. So Farm Starts are basically training schemes for people that want to do market gardening. So they have a year being trained, working on a site, getting experience, and they can go off and then set up their own sort of mini market gardens. So around Lancaster, and I guess this area as well, there would have been a lot of market gardens, especially around the centre of Lancaster, that would have supplied food into the city. And that's like one of the long-term visions, is that we have more market gardens around Lancaster and Morecambe and around the rest of the area, kind of feeding food in, so that if we ever have like supply chain issues, we've got people that can grow food. We know a bit more where our food is coming from. We're able to get a lot more veg than we currently get. Like we can get a bit of veg, I think, down sort of south of like Garstang, out if you go to Pinning Way and down towards Southport. But yeah, trying to grow a bit more around here in a different type of way. So yeah, The Plot, it currently runs like a food box scheme, so it's organic veg. You can invest to like you become a crop share, so you kind of invest in it, and by doing that you also support people to train. So this year we've got 7 people signed up that are going to be training to become market gardeners, with the idea that they will find bits of land, hopefully locally, and start their own projects. So that's been going for 3 years now, and it's been good. I think everyone that's done the scheme has realised it's really important to do the training and to do it with other people, because it's quite challenging to grow fruit and veg in the northwest with the wet winters and the very dry summers now. But part of this regenerative food economy aspect, we host the Northern Real Farming Conference. So this was born out of the Oxford Real Farming Conference, which is a very famous alternative farming conference down south. It happens at the same time as the Oxford Farming Conference, which is the kind of more industrial scale farming conference. And they basically have it in the same place. They meet, they have some socials and a bit of cross-fertilisation of ideas, but they have very different ideas for how farming could be in the UK. And one of the farmers came back from that and said, oh, it's really good, but I'd love to see a northern version because it's different up here and there's not so much northern kind of examples. So yeah, we've had 2 years of the Northern Real Farming Conference. We've got lots of videos online on kind of what people are doing here. Like sharing stories is really important about how farmers and food producers are producing food well in the north of England, and also it's also supported in the north of England. So yeah, actually we have lots of videos online from farmers that gave talks at previous sessions that have gone out and re-interviewed them and had a chat with them. And I think that's really key. That's a major element of our work, is telling stories, so telling producer stories. So there's Kath there and Bill Grayson with their cows. That's in our community food magazine. We tell their story, videos of kind of what farmers are doing. We also speak to other food producers, so we speak to people that are using the food, so running kind of cafes or stalls, or so this is a Morecambe Bay Chowder company. I interviewed him because he uses all local ingredients and local suppliers, and it's just sort of showing this alternative to just the mainstream way of having food. Yeah, it is really good. It's tasty. I shouldn't do any promotion of that, but other chowder companies are available, I'm sure. So in community food skills, this is another aspect, and we've got a big project around this called Where the Wildings Are, and it's working with the Morecambe Bay curriculum, which I think it's kind of slightly come out of Eden and out of Lancaster University, with the idea that there's going to be a curriculum locally that is about skills and the land around here and the place. So children are learning skills that are relevant to this place, but also relevant to life. So around food, around cooking, mending, building like a better type of kind of way of interacting with our environment and each other. With the idea that they can do the Morecambe Bay curriculum all the way through school and then actually go into the university at Lancaster as well. So they don't need to have a traditional set of A-levels. And this is one of the projects that's kind of actually come out of that so far, and from Food Futures. And we're working with schools around the district to put food growing into their spaces, so design for them food growing gardens, and then also put it into their lessons, so integrate kind of learning about food growing, learning about soil, learning about biodiversity into their curriculum. And so I think there's 7 schools that are doing it last year, and another 7 schools have signed up for this year. But the idea, again, eventually that all the schools hopefully will have some kind of food growing in their space. And then we do lots of other things as well. So we're doing lots of cooking demonstrations. So we run these pop-up cooking stores at markets, teaching different types of skills. We've done this summer or last summer an 11-day kind of food growing course. So if you wanted to run a community food project, how would you do it? What are the skills you need? How do you work together? Teaching stuff around seed saving. So all these kind of skills that are essential, I guess, sort of part of learning to grow your own food right from the very start to what you do with that at the end. We're running workshops for more professional chefs as well, around how you can cook with more kind of plant-based materials, how you can make plant-based food taste cheesy or fishy, or and we're also running this North Lancashire menu recipe challenge. So we're actually, this is a bit of a plug, we're looking for some, if you know any good recipes that you can cook with food from around here that's seasonal, we're looking for people to submit kind of their recipes in to us, and we'll share them, and there's a prize draw as well. So yeah, think about what you can grow here and what you might want to cook with it. And then this is a Food Justice Partnership. So I asked Jenny this morning, who coordinates the Food Justice Partnership, if she could share me a few slides. So I was putting this together, and she sent me these over. But the Food Justice Partnership, they have this action plan, because their aim is to ensure that all residents have access to affordable, nourishing food. And then have these different areas that they're working on. So raising the profile of food poverty as an issue, designing pathways so that people can get support and then kind of move out of kind of crisis support. So food banks are there if you're really desperate, you really need very emergency kind of food. And then there's other kinds of ways that people can be supported to access food more kind of equitably. So yeah, they have a lot of different aspects there they're working on. And the idea of kind of what they're working towards is this food ladder, levels of intervention. So yeah, you have food banks there, which is catching people that are in crisis. Rung 2, which is capacity building, are food clubs, community cafes, and cook and eat sessions. So it's giving people more alternative ways to access food that doesn't involve lots of money. So food clubs, you quite often pay a membership, a low-cost membership, £5 a week, I think it used to be. And you'll get about £20 to £30 worth of food that was otherwise going to go to waste, so it's being redistributed. Community cafes as well, that you get cafes that cook with wasted or what was going to be wasted food, and then do a pay-as-you-fill thing. So some people might spend a lot of money on a dish, and other people can get it for very little money. So kind of trying to not just rely on emergency aid, but thinking of our own approaches. And at the end there's Rung 3, which is a big jump between Rung 2 and Rung 3, self-organising community change. And I think Food Futures, more generally, the whole partnership is trying to do Rung 3, so try and create our own ways to make sure there's enough food so that people aren't going hungry. And the whole idea is that we don't there's been a huge reliance on food banks, and we need to move away from this kind of crisis response and more towards what can we do together, whilst at the same time sort of campaigning for greater fairness, because a lot of the food bank and food policy issues come from people just not having enough money because the rest of it goes on rent, energy. So yeah, the things that the Food Justice Partnership are doing, so they have emergency support for people that are already providing food aid across the district, so they're giving money to buying co-ops to allow people to go down to Preston and pick up food that's from Fair Share there, so that's a surplus food redistribution place in Preston. They're trying to understand better what is food insecurity like in Lancaster district, so they're designing a database that shows all the food aid organisations across the district, who's accessing them, who's providing other services around, not just around food, but other sort of support services to help people move out of crisis. And they're also trying to make sure that there's a kind of pathway so that people know how to get help. So there's unified referral pathways. If you've got a crisis, where do you go to get help? Where do you go to get support in the first place? And then this is my working group. This is a healthy food and environment working group. And our work is about creating a zero waste district. So we do stuff around this top one here that looks like cauliflowers. It's actually kale. So it's ornamental kale this guy grows down somewhere near Southport, I think. And yeah, he's always experimenting. He has quite a lot of, often a lot of waste in the fields. So we go out and harvest from him. But also cauliflowers, apples in the apple season. So it's called gleaning, and it's the idea that you go out to the field and you take kind of stuff that isn't going to be harvested, and all of that food is either redistributed through the Food Club network, so it goes back into the Food Justice Partnership work, or we have a market stall quite often and we'll be just handing it out just to show people, talk to people about food waste and how much it's being generated. We do composting, so we're setting up a composting demonstration network across the district. This is Diana, our community composter. I'll mention a little bit more about her actually in a minute. We work with the textiles, the Sewing Cafe Lancaster, so they do a lot of work around the textile industry and textile waste. So we don't just do food within this group, we're trying to extend to other people that are doing similar kind of minded work, even if it's on different kind of resources or materials. We do a lot of work around getting healthy food on the menu, social prescribing, which is the idea that people can be prescribed nature-based things or kind of social activities rather than just medication or counselling. So you can go and get support and go to different places for a social activity that will hopefully help build your mental health. We try and influence local planning where we can, and we try and support kind of agroecological food production. I thought I'd just put this in quickly because this brings it back to the Future Places Centre. So I work 4 days a week for Food Futures on a project that we won. I do 1 day a week with the Future Places Centre, and I have this weird mash of jobs now. But with Future Places Centre, we try and sort of see where there's things that we could work on together that are digital, that are interesting around the community, but help with the project as well and help with the work of Food Futures. And something we did together is we did this map of places we could potentially grow food in Lancaster District, mapping out kind of community spaces, disused spaces, and Jan and me designed this kind of interactive tour of Lancaster city centre actually, visiting a few places where food was being grown already in the middle of the city and places that could potentially be used in the future for food and places that had been used as well in the past for food, so visiting like an allotment site that's no longer an allotment site. We put little sensors out in these places, so you went to the place and when you got there, some images and some text and some audio came up to tell you a bit more about the place. And the idea was just to get people exploring, I guess, and seeing these places they might see every day for a slightly different lens. And then, yes, so this is now what I'm working on. And this project, the Closing Loops project, sits in that Healthy Food and Environment Working Group. And we had all these big ambitions, and then we realised that we needed a lot more kind of paid capacity to make the things happen. And at the time, the National Lottery had a huge amount of money going for Climate Action Fund projects. And they were particularly interested in that round in waste and sustainable consumption. So we pulled lots of stuff that had come out of the strategy into a proposal and put it to the National Lottery, and we got funding for this Closing Loops project, which is a 5-year project. We got 1.5 million for it to support our communities to take action around climate change, waste and sustainable consumption. And the idea is that we're developing initiatives, or we're working with community groups, or we're working with businesses, or basically anyone across the district that's trying to turn waste into a valuable resource locally. Oh yes, I'm about to finish, so just keep in quiet.
There's a few minutes.
Yeah, okay. And some of the things that we're doing, so we have the North Lancashire Chef and Food Network. We've got 2 coordinators there, and they're basically looking for anyone that wants to run cooking classes, or anyone that is a community chef and feels they want to share their skills, to run cooking demos, to run training. And we're also creating this North Lancashire menu that we want to get into like the restaurants and schools and cafes in the district, so that it's more around kind of what we can grow locally, what we can grow seasonally, like more plant-based with some good, like very well-produced meats and dairy. We've got a gleaning project, so that's going out to rescue surplus food that's going to waste on farms and going and just seeing, I guess, taking volunteer groups out to see like what is happening like in the field. So I can't ever find this picture of the cauliflowers, but they brought back boxes, like this many cauliflowers in this amount of space, all perfect. And they're just slightly the wrong size for the supermarket contract. And I think it's really important to get people out seeing that for themselves, because I think it makes it feel more real than if someone just tells you. We have a composting academy demonstration site, so Diana, who you saw earlier, she's basically setting up every year 4 demonstration sites locally that will show different types of ways of composting or can help composting at a different scale. So this year she's setting up one in a school, one on a community farm, one on a community food project, and one that's in a park, so the whole community can use it. And she's also training people, so if there's anyone here that's really interested to know more about compost, I should be keen to come out to Arnside and do a training session. Or if there's anyone that loves compost and wants to be a compost ambassador out here, then she could also help them to do that. We have a whole strand of work that's about this idea of re-economy, which is, and this is a bit that I'm not good at explaining easily, it's about kind of a different type of economy, one that we have much more reuse, repurposing, recycling, but it's also about regeneration, so it's one that's sharing of resources, sharing of spaces, sharing of time. So they're doing lots of feasibility of work about what that could look like here, but we also have a big funding pot that we're going to allocate out, so we'll be running community grants. So if people have ideas for something that fits in around kind of our themes, so like food waste, compost, repurposing, reuse of materials, you might want to think about putting in bids for that to kind of help get stuff started or take things to the next level. And then we also run markets, we have a magazine, we're doing citizen journalism, so getting people to write their own stories and go out and interview people and find out what's happening locally. And then lots of work like connecting producers and crafters with people that might purchase their stuff and other food systems. So I've got some leaflets, so I'm going to leave them out if you're interested. It's like this is what the project's about, and then that's what's on that side. And I've also got, so this is a bit of a plug, I guess. So we have our seasonal markets, they're in Lancaster Market Square. We also support other markets, so we go to Morecambe, they have a market on the seafront there, so we go and take some stalls. But we have our own market in Lancaster Market Square 4 times a year. The spring one's on Friday the 17th of March, and we get lots of local producers to come, so it's very different from the normal market. It'll be a lot more crafters and local food producers. And then we also have this magazine, Thrive, which we put out every quarter, which is where we share lots of stories of things that are happening locally, and some from further away actually as well, just to bring that inspiration in. So I have some copies there by the door, which you might have seen. That's winter, and I've also got autumn's copy. I've got one last box of those, so I thought I'd bring them to see if you're particularly interested. Yes, so I think that is a bit of a whistle-stop tour about what's happening with food locally, but here I thought we were trying to take stuff back into our own hands, and I always have this photo because this is Claver Hill Community Food Project, which is just on the outskirts of Lancaster, and it's grade 4 agricultural land, so this is like land that in theory is not good for very much apart from some grazing, maybe light grazing. It's also a floodplain, and back in 2013 a group of local residents got together. Actually, two of them bought the land in the first place, and they got together and they cleared up stones, they put in these shelter belts, they started to put in these food beds, and now it's this amazing food producing space that also offers, this is a flood management system that was put in and designed by a permaculture designer, Rod, and funded by the Lune Valleys Rivers Trust to reduce pollution into the River Lune and flooding further down. We have all of our own woods, and it's just a really amazing biodiverse site that had just been a kind of abandoned piece of ex-grazing land. So I think a lot of positive can come about if you can imagine something very positive in the future. So that's it from me. And I'll take questions after the tea break, I guess.